Hello and welcome to Calvin's Garage. Today we're going to be talking about winter driving, and I'm going to give you my top tips for navigating the winter roads in Vermont and elsewhere. Even if you are not in somewhere that gets heavy snow for a large portion of the year, you should still keep these tips in mind because there have been, at least in the past few years, even in places that don't normally get snow, such as Texas, there have been a couple weeks out of the year that have had snow. So you need to keep these tips in mind. That way you don't end up in a, what was it last year, 30-car pileup somewhere on the interstate near DFW. We don't want that to happen again. So rule number one is pretty simple. Just slow down. Leave your house sooner to be able to drive slower and still get to your destination on time. The speed limits, when speed limits are set up, they are considered to be the maximum safe speed for the average vehicle on the road during clear, dry, light conditions. So if it's dark, if the roads are not dry, if they're covered in snow or ice, or if your car doesn't have the proper equipment, the speed limit is not necessarily safe to drive. So just slow down. A lot of the accidents that I have seen over the years, speed has been a factor. If the person had just slowed down, the accident would not have happened. Even if you have an SUV, a Jeep, something with all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive, that doesn't mean that you can drive however you want to and you'll be fine. This one makes me really mad because my first car, a car I really liked, was wrecked one day because of some other driver. They were driving a Jeep and they figured since it was all-wheel drive, that meant they could drive as fast as they wanted to. So they were racing a yellow light to make a right turn onto a road. They spun out in the intersection because they were driving on bald BFG all-terrain tires. They spun out in the intersection and they hit my car. Please, just slow down. You can stay out of so much trouble by just slowing down. And if you are inexperienced driving in snow and inexperienced dealing with things like skids and issues, braking and stuff like that, you should just slow down. That way you never have to deal with any of those issues. Rule number two is to have the right equipment. When you are traveling during the winter, especially if there is a winter weather advisory, you should keep an emergency kit in your car. Things like flashlights, hand warmers, emergency blankets, and road flares. That way, if you become stranded, you can stay safe until help arrives. You should also make sure you dress for the weather, have an appropriate amount of cold weather clothing in your car. That way, again, you can stay warm. You should also make sure that your car is prepared to drive during the winter. The biggest thing that I'm talking about is snow tires. Now, if you live somewhere that doesn't see a lot of snow and maybe they're really good about clearing the roads, then you can get by with a good set of all-season tires. However, if you live somewhere where there's a lot of snow, where there's big storms, a dedicated set of snow tires have been specifically engineered to perform best in those snowy environments. So you should pick yourself up a set of snow tires. They perform much better than all-terrain tires on snow and ice. I'm actually planning on doing a separate video on snow tires and how they are engineered and designed to be the best in snow. So look forward to that video. Actually a funny story, so I had a plow truck get stuck in the intersection by my house. He came, it's an uphill intersection with a stop sign, so he stopped in the intersection, but then when he tried to go, he spun out because of the ice and ended up in the ditch near our barn driveway. Now, if my truck had been running, I could have just pulled him out, but unfortunately it wasn't running at the time. But with some shoveling and some sand and some traction boards, we were able to get him out. but the reason that he couldn't navigate that intersection is because he had an old pair of all-terrain BFGs with the treads kind of worn out. It's just funny that the truck that is designed to go out in these storms and clear snow out of people's driveways so that people that have, smaller cars, which are generally thought of as being less able to navigate the snow, they can get out of their driveways, they can go about their business. But here, this truck, which is specifically designed, and it's this guy's job, it's his livelihood to go out and plow these driveways, and his truck gets stuck in the snow at an intersection that my mom's Camry, which has snow tires, is able to navigate with no problem whatsoever. Of course, even if whether your vehicle is or isn't good in the snow, make sure you keep watching because there's more tips later on. Rule number 3 is a two-parter. So part number 1 is to know your equipment. Part number 2 is to practice. Now they go hand in hand because how can you know your equipment if you've never practiced with your equipment? Something I recommend for all drivers, especially those who are maybe new to driving altogether or just new to driving in places that have snow, I would recommend finding an empty parking lot somewhere where it is safe, a controlled environment, and practice things like how to get out of a skid, practice what emergency braking on surfaces that are slippery is like. I have seen a lot of people, they'll be on ice and snow and they'll hit their brake pedal and the vehicle just doesn't stop. And they'll think that there's something wrong with their car because when they push on their brake pedal, the brake pedal is like pushing back and like jerking, and the car makes this weird sound. Sometimes it's like sometimes it's more like a grinding type noise, and they'll think there's something wrong with their brakes, something wrong with their car. Maybe they'll take their foot off the brake because they're worried about messing something up. That actually isn't anything wrong with your car. That's your car's anti-lock braking system. You need to know how it feels to have that anti-lock braking system come on. That way you don't panic when it actually does come on. And if your car does not have anti-lock brakes, or if your anti-lock braking system is broken, that's something that you need to know before you end up in a situation out on the road. You also need to learn to recognize where your wheels are pointed. During normal driving, wherever your wheels are pointed, that's where your cars are going to go. So it's fairly easy to tell if your wheels are straight or turned. However, when you have low traction, your car is not always going to go the direction where your wheels are pointed, but you need to recognize where your wheels are pointed, and that'll help with tip number 4. Rule number 4 is to always keep your wheels pointed where you want to go. So we have this car here, and it's coming up to this turn, and this turn has some snow, has some ice on it. The person turns their wheels just like they would if they were navigating the turn normally. But then the back end starts to kick out and suddenly they're in a skid. Their car is pointed in this direction toward this snowbank right here. Now, the natural response is to try to turn your wheels, and unfortunately, a lot of people get into trouble when they overcorrect. So they they crank their wheel over to the other side as far as it'll go. Number 1, that's not really helpful because it is actually less likely for you to regain traction when your wheels are pointed so far from the direction that the car is going. But number 2, if you do regain traction, you're going to overcorrect and suddenly you're going to be going into this ditch right here. So always keep your wheels pointed where you want to go. You want to be careful, and then This is also something that you just need to practice, knowing where your wheels are pointed and making sure that your wheels are pointed where you want the car to go. Now this was a kind of bad example because I drew this skid a little bit steep, but let's say it was something more like this. Pointing your wheels like that, car regains traction and you go this way. But if you have your wheels pointed more like that, car regains traction and you go that way. Overcorrecting is a huge problem where a lot of people get into trouble. Rule number 6 seems very contrary to rule number 1, and that is because it comes with some caveats. So rule number 6 is sometimes you need to go faster. Obviously, I don't mean barreling down the highway at breakneck speeds. However, sometimes you do need that extra momentum to navigate some obstacle in the snow. This mainly applies when you are traveling up a hill through some deep snow, or maybe to get out of a ditch. Basically, the idea is overcoming inertia. So on ice and snow, you have less traction. This means if you stop your vehicle, you won't be able to start again, especially on a hill where the wheels have to provide traction to overcome the force of gravity that is pulling your vehicle down the hill. Therefore, you want to have enough momentum to reach the top of the hill or break through the snow at the end of your driveway, or to get out of that ditch before you start going up the hill. That way you can get all the way up the hill without having to apply more throttle, because if you apply more throttle, you're more likely to break traction, and once you break traction, you're going back down that hill. So in this situation, you know, maybe you're thinking from rule number 1, okay, I need to be driving slow, so let's take this hill at 15 miles per hour. You get halfway up and you find that you don't have enough momentum, so you step on the gas. However, your tires break traction and back down the hill you go. On your second run, maybe try at 25 miles per hour, at least initially. So you go back further, you accelerate up to 25 miles an hour, and then on the hill you aren't touching the gas pedal and you're just letting that momentum carry you up. Now maybe by the time you reach the top of the hill, you're only going like 5 miles an hour, but at least you made it up the hill without needing to push on your gas pedal and possibly breaking traction and rolling back down. So that is what I mean by rule number 6. Sometimes you need a little bit more momentum to make it through an obstacle than you think you do. This video is already stretching longer than I wanted it to, and with these last 3 tips, I figured that it would probably stretch out to like 25 to 30 minutes long for a video, which I know is very long for YouTube, so I decided to split it into a second part. So tune in next week for part 2 of this video, more winter driving tips. You won't want to miss it.